They say the hardest part of riding is the ground, but I think anyone who says that has never had their trust betrayed by their horse before. Several years ago now, was walking my, at the time, 2-year-old filly, and she was being so brave and really having a great training session, and she was sniffing lots of kind of scary things, and we had a great time. And then we were just wrapping up and headed back to her pasture, and she very unexpectedly spooked and took off and kicked out behind her, and of course nailed me right in the hip really hard, all at the same time, very quickly. And I put her away and then drove myself to the hospital for x-rays. And the entire way there, I was just having thoughts racing through my mind about what this meant. Was she a bad horse? Was I a bad trainer? Was she going to be spooky and jumpy forever? Had I missed something? Was there something I could have done differently? How was I going to prevent this from happening again in the future? And I have to say, it really took a toll on my confidence for quite a while, and it definitely was harder for me to trust specifically that horse. And even still, this was, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago. Even still, I notice myself a little bit more on edge around her when she gets a little bit nervous than I do other horses. And I thought this was a really great topic to talk about here because I also see this happening all the time with my clients. Hi, I'm Ruby. I'm a whole horsemanship trainer, and I help horses and their riders just like you to build a deeper connection through trust and whole horsemanship practices so that you can find more meaning in the slog of the day-to-day, as well as enjoy your horse that much more. Today we're talking specifically about when your horse has done something that has caused you to trust them less or to lose some confidence in them. And this doesn't always necessarily need to be something like what I spoke about earlier about my young horse physically hurting me. It could also be something like your horse just suddenly is more reactive than they used to be, or they, I don't know, learn to cheese grater you on the rail, or they start being really gate sour and you're just feeling really frustrated and you feel like you don't really know how to fix this problem and you're in over your head. Any of those things can really take a toll on our confidence, especially when you're just wanting to ride for fun and you're just wanting to enjoy your horse, and suddenly it's not so fun anymore. So I'm going to give you some real tangible things that you can do today, 4 things that I use with my clients all the time and that I also have used for myself with my own horses when I need a little confidence boost, things to help me to continue to move forward and continue to enjoy my horses and be able to trust them again after a hard spell. So the first thing I'm going to recommend is that you think about your feet. I call it kind of finding your feet. So think about breathing really deeply into your feet. If you're on the horse, really feel your toes in your boots, feel the pressure of the stirrups under the balls of your feet. Feel if maybe your feet are hot or cold in your socks. Feel if maybe one foot feels different than the other. And just by paying some really close attention to your feet, this is really going to ground you in the present moment and remind your fight or flight brain that you're not actively in a moment of fight or flight right now. And just because something's been happening that maybe triggered that response or continues to trigger that response in you, that action is not necessarily happening in this moment. I think about a specific client, we'll call her Megan for today, and she used to anticipate that her horse was going to spook anytime it saw a bicycle. And while the horse did sometimes spook at bicycles, the horse eventually started just getting more anxious and nervous even before it saw the bicycle because Megan saw the bike. And so they would end up causing this kind of like feedback loop where Megan was scared of the bike and scared that the horse was going to spook. And so then the horse would get more nervous. And then by the time the horse actually saw the bike, they would really react. And just by paying attention to her feet and breathing really deeply down into her feet, we were able to sort of short circuit this feedback loop. Not only did Megan feel more confident riding her horse, but also the horse felt more confident with Megan and trusted her more, and so was actually less reactive to bikes. Really cool how the feedback loop kind of changed in that way. If you have a horse that is reactive to various things or unexpected surprising things, check out my previous 2 videos about sacking out and helping your horse to cope with scary and surprising things, because I think you'll find a lot of really helpful resources there. The second thing that you can practice, and this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but is thinking about the worst case scenario. So I have a client right now that's been working through a horse that is really hard to catch. And we talked about the other day, like, what is the absolute worst that could happen? And it turns out like the worst thing that could happen is that she takes a little longer to catch him, or maybe he like turns and runs away in the stall, but he's in a small stall. He's not even in a big pasture. So really the worst case scenario is not so bad. And sometimes letting yourself go to that worst case scenario and realizing that it's really not so bad, or role playing in your mind what you would do in that worst case scenario. So like for me with my horse kicking me, I don't let a horse's head get in front of my shoulders anymore, because I know if their head is at my shoulders and they just spook and take off, I can pull their nose toward me and their hind end is going to go away and I'm not going to get kicked again. So thinking about what is that worst case scenario and how do I protect myself in that situation? Or is the worst case scenario really not so bad and I can just kind of let it go? The third thing is going to be actually the opposite of that, and it's going to be to envision the best case scenario. So in this case, this is what I've been working on with my client that has the horse that's hard to catch. What we've started doing is having her stop outside the gate and take a moment to just envision this all going perfectly well, exactly as it's supposed to, and just taking a couple deep breaths and really imagining herself walking through the gate, her horse coming over to her, putting his head down. She puts the halter on, maybe gives him a scratch, and then walks out. And then after just imagining this briefly, she actually goes in and does it. And what we found is not only is she not dreading catching her horse anymore, in fact, she said that she used to even stay up at night dreading catching her horse. She loves riding her horse. She loves everything to do with this horse. But the actual act of catching him was enough to make her start dreading coming to the barn the next day. And now that she started doing this quick little exercise, not only is she no longer dreading catching her horse, but actually he's been easier to catch as well. And if your horse is hard to catch or you have some kind of little quirky thing like that that's really been bothering you, that's working you up to a point that you're actually kind of dreading hanging out with your horse, you should definitely check out my foundations workshop, which is linked below, because we're going to be diving into all kinds of things like that, including standing to be mounted, horses that are hard to catch, that don't stand well tied, that are fidgety at the gate or that are gate sour, and so much more all in one course. And I think you'll find a lot of help there. The fourth thing that I think is really helpful and is truly just underrated and undervalued by almost everybody I know, not just in riding, but in lots of sports, is deep breathing. One thing that I do is I try to build in a deep breath to moments that I know tend to be kind of rushed through or overlooked. So for me, I have now a habit of every time I tighten my cinch, I know I'm going to tighten my cinch before I get on my horse every single time, or at least check it. And I know now that if I take a deep breath every time I tighten my cinch and intentionally come into the present moment, forget any rides I've had earlier in the day, forget any rides I've had previously on this horse, and just really show up for this specific ride that's about to happen and take a moment to just be intentional about that before I get on, I can start the ride in such a better frame of mind and be more confident and be able to really let go of any of the anxiety or fears that crop up in my mind, especially when I'm actually working with a horse that I'm training, because, imposter syndrome creeps up, or I start to feel the pressure of like the deadline of trying to have this horse improve in a certain amount of time or fix a bad habit in a certain amount of time. And that pressure can actually interfere in a way that makes it harder for me to do my job. So by taking a moment to just take a couple of deep breaths and find my present moment and then get on the horse, I can start clean. So you could do this before you get your horse out of their stall, or before you tie them at the tie rail, or anything that kind of seems to bring up a moment of anxiety for you with your horse or lack of trust for you with your horse, just for a moment to kind of help you reset. Build in a deep breath there and make it such a routinely used habit that you don't even have to think about it. It just happens naturally. I hope that those four things are really helpful for you, but those four things are not actually going to fix your horse's bad habits. They're just going to help your perception of those moments and help you to find the ability to trust your horse and move on and forgive those bad habits. But if you want help fixing your horse's bad habits, check out my Magic Moments playlist, because I have some really great tangible things there that you can do to actually fix bad habits that crop up in your horse. And also check out my Foundations workshop. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I really am excited about it because it's going to go in depth into all of the key things. I've been talking to lots of you about the kind of habits that make your horse less enjoyable or your barn time less enjoyable. And we're going to go in depth into all of those over an 8-week period to really fix all of those and fill all the holes in your horse's foundations. And in your foundations, we're going to build your confidence as your horse's handler and trainer and partner. And we're also going to make your horse actually more enjoyable to be around with real tangible change from day one. So I hope that you'll check that out. It's all linked below. And until next time, make sure to hug your horse for me.